Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I'd like to remind the Chamber of my register of interest in that I was formerly the convener of Together, the Scottish Alliance for Children's Rights. Now, I will use my time this afternoon to offer the guarded support of my party to the general principles of this bill. I say guarded because rarely in the consideration of primary legislation does a bill attract such comprehensive pressure from stakeholders who want us to go further. There has been a lot of talk about pace in this debate. That is the rate at which we believe the public and the people of Scotland will accept further change in this area. Well, Presiding Officer, we have been moving at a snail's pace just to get to this point. It has been a long and frustrating road. Our commitment to raise the age of criminal responsibility was first laid out in a report to the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child in 2012. At that time, Aileen Campbell assured the UN that Scotland would bring the ACR to the age of 12 in the life of the last Parliament. With legislative opportunities in that session running out, my friend and colleague Alison McInnes used a valiant Stage 3 amendment to the Criminal Justice Bill of 2015 to deliver on that commitment to the UN, only to see it rejected by the Justice Secretary and voted down by the government benches. That vote ensured that Scotland retained one of the lowest ACRs in the world. I don't think it's unreasonable, Presiding Officer, to suggest that this government had arguably lied to the United Nations. Put simply, the UN set a floor of 12 as the minimum age of criminal responsibility to be adopted no later than 2007, and for countries to work upwards from that point. All told, 3 parliaments have sat and risen from this chamber since that international starting gun was fired. Only now has this government finally brought our country to the races. Now, the Minister suggests that they have elected to stick at 12 because the majority of the respondents to their consultation agreed that that's where it should be set. But 12 is all they asked about. It is particularly striking, therefore, that a powerful majority of written respondents to the government consultation and our Stage 1 call for evidence still volunteered that we should go further. The overwhelming majority of witnesses in our Stage 1 consideration in committee felt the same. And this was summed up, I think, most powerfully in the words of our Commissioner for Children and Young People, Bruce Adamson, when he said that we need to be looking at 14 or 16 as the norm internationally. If Scotland wants to be a human rights leader, I am very confused as to why we are talking about 12 rather than 16 or higher. Now, Stage 1 was hugely important to our understanding of the issue, and I want to thank everyone who contributed to that, witnesses, respondents, and indeed our clerks. The experience of countries to go before us in that was vital. And we learned that Denmark, which had lowered their age of criminal responsibility from 15 to 14 on the election of a more right-wing government, had then reversed that decision shortly after due to an increase in offending behaviour and a decline in positive outcomes. But it is in the lived experience of young people which we found most compelling. Now, we've already heard of Lindsay Hamage's story in this debate. It was possibly the most compelling witness statement that I have heard in my parliamentary career. A young girl arrested on the night she was to be taken into care. She was being removed from her mother and, in her own words, she kicked off. This led to her being charged and spending a night in the cells. You could have heard a pin drop when she said, "I spent my first night in care in a prison cell, locked up. I had done nothing wrong, but I felt like I had." She went on to describe the enduring harm that this has caused her. Presiding Officer, Lindsay was just 13 years old, and yet nothing about this bill, not one clause or section, would have changed her story or outcomes that she may well now face for the rest of her life. So I will work to amend this bill at subsequent stages to see us answer the challenge not just of the United Nations, but of our sister nations across this continent who put our efforts in this area to shame. But Lindsay's story does not just shine a light on the lack of government ambition in the age they choose, but her testimony reminds us that we regularly lock our children up in police station cells in contravention of their Article 37 rights defined under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. And I was concerned from the outset that in the place of safety provisions of the bill, the only place so mentioned on the face of the bill, albeit in the context of last resort, was the police station. When only one place of safety is so defined, it runs the risk of becoming the default. And I don't think any of us would recognise a police station on a Friday night as a place of safety for vulnerable young children. So I will seek amendments which promote the use of best practice alternatives. I will also seek amendments to expressly prohibit the use of cells for the containment of children. Presiding officer, I have fought for children's rights all of my adult life, and I do not intend to stop now. As such, we will support this bill tonight, but we do so with a sense of disappointment, shared by so many witnesses and stakeholders who want us to go further. This is not a radical bill. This is not even a progressive bill. Instead, it is a bill which finally achieves the de minimis standard of international expectation. On this issue, we will find ourselves on a par with the 4 most socially conservative countries in Europe, and as such, it leaves us wildly adrift of our shared ambition to make Scotland the best place in the world to grow up. Thank you.